Future, Tennessee's 1st District GOP Congressional Debate. From Northeast State Community College. Now, let's meet the candidates.
Good evening. I'm Mark HYMAN. We're live at Northeast State Community College. Thank you for joining us for this Republican primary debate for Tennessee's 1st Congressional District. Tonight's candidates are Jay Adkins, John Clark, Steve Darden, Josh Gapp, David Hawk, and Timothy Hill. Now for our audience. If your only experience in watching political debates was during the 2016 presidential election, then you're in for a surprise. There will be no trick or gotcha questions by the panelists, no showboating by the moderator. Tonight's debate provides an opportunity for the candidates to highlight the differences in their policies and political platforms. If you want the silliness of 2016, then I urge you to watch the cable news channels. The order in which the candidates are standing and the order in which they will deliver their closing remarks was determined earlier by the campaign's drawing cards. Our distinguished panel asking questions tonight will be Andrea Wilcox of the Kingsport Office of Small Business Development and Entrepreneurship, PJ Johnson of WCYB News 5, and Julie Bennett of Bristol Motor Speedway. There will be no opening statements. Each candidate has 60 seconds to respond to a question. They each have 4 30-second rebuttals, which they may use at their discretion to either rebut a candidate's remarks or to extend their own remarks. However, all rebuttals must be used prior to closing statements. We have a small live audience observing COVID-19 safety precautions. I've asked the audience to refrain from any reaction during the debate, as this only takes time away from our candidates. However, there are 2 exceptions. One is at the conclusion of the debate, and the other is right now when we welcome the candidates. Gentlemen, we have a lot of ground to cover. Good luck. Let's get started. The first question tonight will come from Andrea Wilcox. We'll start off with you, Dr. Gapp.
Thank you.
We've witnessed in real time how damaging a pandemic can be. How should the U.S. prepare to avoid another pandemic?
Thank you. That's a great question. Let me just take a quick second to introduce myself to the audience, especially the viewers at home. My name is Josh Gapp. I'm a physician here in the region. I've treated over 45,000 patients in the region, I'm trained in pathology and virology, and epidemiology. And so this question in particular is a great question. It's hard to know what the next big one is. I think we need to stay vigilant with the science behind our monitoring of the different diseases that are out there in the world today. With this particular one, I see my time is up. Sorry.
Mr. Clark, the same question.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm John Clark. I'm honored to be here. Thank you to this facility and also to this TV station for having this debate. For me, it's all about relationships. We need to continue as a country. We need to continue having relationships with all different countries out there. I think that's very, very important so that we can keep an eye on what's going on. Now, it's true that this pandemic started in communist China. Well, communist governments are ones that you cannot prepare for or you can't trust. And so it makes it even more difficult because we really don't have, as a free country, we definitely don't have the type of relationship where we can go into these communistic countries and really seek out the truth. So, but we still need to have some sort of relationship with all countries, including communist governments, so that we have a feel and we can try to detect when things are not going well and things that may harm us in this country. Thank you.
Mr. Hawk, same.
Today, COVID-19 is certainly a novel experience for all of us. There's really nothing that could have prepared us for this. It's been 100 years since we've seen an epidemic or a pandemic of this nature before, so there's really nothing that can prepare us. Now that we've experienced this, we're several months into it, we'll be better prepared for the next time. Number one, we must realize that COVID-19 is real and that it is a real situation. Folks are getting sick, and we must evaluate that on a day-by-day basis, as you've seen in the news. Number two, we must realize that there are other diseases out there. We have folks who get cancer every day. We have folks who have heart disease every day. And we must realize that COVID-19 is a very serious issue, but there are other serious issues that we have to take into effect each day that we live our lives. That being said, we have to make sure that we get the best information from all of our physicians so we in the governmental entity can make good decisions. Thank you.
Mr. Hill?
The bottom line is we need to make sure we protect our small businesses and small business owners. We need to focus on individual responsibility and education. A lot of the pandemic that has happened has been hyped by the media. It is a real thing. There's no question about that. But we need to focus on truth as opposed to hype and start there. We can find a way to encourage people to protect themselves, be responsible.
Best information from all of our physicians.
Mr. Atkins?
Hi, I'm Jay Atkins, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. What we have to do is we have to get our house in order. You know, this country has a huge deficit and a huge debt, and it's, you know, with our households, we might have a credit card for emergencies, but this country's already maxed out our credit card. We need to prepare ourselves so that when an emergency does come along, we have the financial stability and the ability to take care of an emergency without signing a $3 trillion check. Because we don't know what the next pandemic will be, but we know that things are going to happen eventually, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's some sort of other international crisis. And we have to protect our supply chains so that they're domestic. Finally, we have to look at what happened 100 years ago. Our great-grandparents were prepared. So we need to do things, have victory gardens, be self-reliant. Thank you.
Mr. Darden?
Thank you. So the question of how do we prepare for another pandemic, we need to have research and predictive models in place so that we can anticipate what is likely to happen. We need to have open communication with other nations so that if there are indications that an illness is developing that could make it to our shores, we need to know that. One problem we've encountered is that key medical supplies are not made here, and I think it's a step in the right direction that President Trump's trade advisor, Peter Navarro, is pushing to require the federal agencies that we have here to buy American-made products. That will encourage domestic production, which will help us when we do have an illness that reaches epidemic or pandemic proportions to be able to have key supplies here domestically for our people's care. And we need to make sure that our research and development facilities are humming at maximum capacity and efficiency.
The second question will come from P.J. Johnson, and we will start with you, Mr. Clark.
Law enforcement has come under greater public scrutiny. What is the role, if any, of the federal government in helping restore public confidence in law enforcement officers?
Well, first of all, law enforcement to me is extremely important. We are a law and order society, and so in my personal experience as mayor of the city of Kingsport, we have excellent police and law enforcement support, and that's because they're not just really well trained and are excellent with equipment, but they also have fantastic community relations. And as long as we have that around the country, I think law and order will prevail. But for me, I think the key component for law and order from a federal perspective is to have the support of the U.S. government behind our local law and order police and sheriff departments, because they're doing unbelievable work out there to try to keep us safe every day. And it's not easy work at all. And so having the support from a local government, the state level, and also the federal level, the combination of those three, I think is what will make law and order be much better received by all citizens in this country.
Mr. Hawk?
Thank you. PJ, thank you for the question. The role of the federal government is to support law enforcement. 99% of our law enforcement officials do everything the right way and by the book. Unfortunately, we see one or two rogue elements out there which captures the headlines and we talk about for weeks, if not months, if not years. So we need to embrace all the good that we have in our law 99% of our law enforcement officials do everything the right way and by the book. Unfortunately, we see one or two rogue elements out 9-year-olds. So I want to make sure that they stay safe, and by doing that is having a strong law enforcement. In that vein, the 1% who violate their oath to keep the public safe, we must find them accountable. And if there are crimes that have been committed, they must be held accountable. Thank you.
Mr. Hill?
The bottom line is we need to defund Planned Parenthood, not the police. Antifa should be labeled a terrorist organization. President Trump has said that, and that has my full support. Our local law enforcement is sterling. Our law enforcement in the 1st Congressional District is fantastic. I've been honored to receive the endorsement of Sullivan County Sheriff Jeff Cassidy, as well as Johnson County Sheriff Edward Tester, because they know that I will stand with law enforcement every step of the way. They know that I'll be supportive. And the federal role is that of support. And we're watching what's going on in Portland right now, where Democrat-controlled cities are being run into the absolute ground because their mayors will not stand for their people. And so when you get in a situation like that and it's extreme, you're going to have to see the federal government step in a limited capacity.
Mr. Atkins?
Well, I believe that the role of the federal government in most issues, not just law enforcement, is extremely limited. We do need to support our local law enforcement. We need to support training. I've got some great friends that are, friends of mine, people I've deployed with that are in law enforcement. And talking to them, it's continuing training, it's continuing support, the kind of things that, we don't really think about, but people in law enforcement, this is a similar thing that the military is dealing with, is the stress of being in a position where you don't know what's going to happen on a daily basis is stressful. And one of my best friends said, we've got to look at taking care of our police officers from a mental health standpoint, because there's something that happens to a person where they become so dead inside that they put their knee on a man's neck for 8 minutes. And it's a limited situation, but we have to seek out those individuals and make sure that they get the help they need.
Your time's expired. Mr. Darden.
As the mayor of Johnson City, I was very proud of the relationship that our police department had with the citizens. Chief John Lowry introduced community policing, and it was a great program because not only did the citizens trust the police and get to know them personally, when someone who had ill intent or set up a drug house or something like that in their neighborhood, they were the first people to go and let the police know that this was going on. 3 weeks ago, I was invited by a couple of veterans organizations, Dog Tag Brigade and Rolling Thunder, to be part of a cookout for the local police and emergency rescue personnel. I was proud to do that to show that we support them and believe in the work they do. The police power is a state function and a local function. If the federal government is needed, the governors have the right to seek help. Certainly the National Guard is at their disposal. The federal government should step in when our federal facilities are jeopardized.
Dr. Gapp?
So political correctness is a cancer in our society, and the latest political correctness attack is defund the police. My brother is a police officer. I've been on ride-alongs with my brother, and I've watched as he's exited his patrol car and tapped on the window of the car in front of him, or as he's exited and knocked on that door of that domestic violence call. And I've watched him put his life on the line for the safety of our communities. And right now, more than ever, our police need our support. They have a target painted on their back, unnecessarily so, by this politically correct crowd that's out there. When I'm in Washington, the police will, the law enforcement community will have my support 100%. They will have a friend up in Washington, and they always will.
Julie Bennett has question number 3, and we'll start with you, Mr. Hawk.
What role does the federal government have in improving race relations?
Thank you, Julie. The federal government has a big role to play in improving race relations, and I think that begins with creating conversation between people instead of having groups shout at each other. That's where we are right now in society. So I think as your next congressman, I will bring organizations and entities together to have conversations about how we can best get along. How can we best understand someone's concerns? As I serve in our state legislature now, there's night and day differences between the three grand divisions of the state of Tennessee, and how we get through problems. We get to know each other on a personal level. We're able to talk to each other, talk about their backgrounds, where they came from. I'll tell them about my background so we know where each person is to start out with. I think that's the best thing we can do, and I will do that as your next congressman.
Mr. Hill?
3 simple words: love thy neighbor. If we can hold to that, the federal government's role, it will be limited in that, because people will be loving and taking care of other people. What we're seeing is a situation where peaceful protest is okay, but when you go to breaking things and destroying property, that is not an appropriate response to anything, because that does not advance a conversation unless there's an agenda beyond what their interest is. Destroying history, destroying statues, tearing them down, that does nothing but erase the good and the bad, which should be learned from. But love your neighbor. If we can simply do that, then we're going to be just fine.
Mr. Atkins?
I have to say that we have to look at what's going on. We're being divided. The federal government's job is to assure that those things our country was built on are enforced, and we provide liberty to all people. The idea that all men are created equal, as imperfectly as this country has implemented that, that's the federal government's job to strive towards that. And I want to say that I think there is a much bigger problem than race relations in this country, and it's fatherlessness. That's what has driven us into these corners, people growing up in broken families. You know, it's not your race that determines as much what happens to you when you grow up. It's the family you grow up in. If you are much more likely to have a good life if you come from a family with a mother and a father. Thank you.
Mr. Darden?
The preamble to the United States Constitution commands us all that our mission is to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. That means that the Civil Rights Act of 1964, that guaranteed employment opportunities and housing opportunities for all, regardless of race, color, creed, national origin, etc., has to always vigilantly be enforced. We are in an era where it appears that, regardless of what the law says, we need work on hearts and minds. And I think that as a congressman, we have the opportunity, and I would exercise that opportunity, to try and convene folks in the various communities throughout the district to try and understand better one another, and to create opportunities for folks of minority status to have better employment opportunities and actually to become entrepreneurs.
And your time has expired.
Thank you.
Dr. Gapp?
Political correctness is a cancer. It's destroying our society. When it comes to the issue of race relations, this is not a federal government issue. This is a political issue. It's a social issue. The radical left is using political correctness as a tool to separate us into little boxes, and using identity politics to pit us against each other. We need strong leaders who are going to stand up and stop this from happening and say it's not okay. We need to love our neighbor as ourselves, use the golden rule, treat people well. But when we continue to use this characterization and putting separating people by these artificial categories, it makes the situation worse, and it's destroying our culture, it's destroying our society. I will stand up in Washington to prevent that.
Mr. Clark?
Yes, I believe the federal government has done its job. We have a constitution in place. It boils down to respect. Human beings must respect other human beings, and we need to lead by example. So our leaders that we have in all different capacities, whether it's government, in the private sector, government sector, or even in our personal lives. Whoever you consider a leader, we must be able to lead by example. We must be able to respect each other's opinions, and this world is big enough for all of us to live together and happily as long as we respect each other. I think that's the bottom line here. We can't afford to have another law that helps us figure out how to work together. It boils down to each and every one of us to do our role in society and to treat everyone with kindness and respect and decency.
Andre Wilcox has question number 4. We'll start with you, Mr. Hill.
Where do you stand on the proposed expansion of Amtrak to the region, and what role do you assume in this matter?
I think that the Congressional office, one of the roles that the next member of Congress is going to play is that of the bully pulpit. What I mean by that is a relationship builder. Amtrak, great. We need to convince Virginia to finish I-26. Great. Whatever is good for this region to help it grow, the member of Congress, and I would see it as my job, to work with everybody to try to see that happen. But, the bottom line is we hear consistently, is it this type of job? Is it, what about manufacturing or retail? The answer is yes. The answer is absolutely all of the above because we've got to grow.
Mr. Adkins.
Well, as much as I love trains and I love being able to have mass transit, I think we really have to look at what it's going to cost. As I said before, this country's spending way more money than we've got. We're living on a credit card that we can't pay off. So before we say we're going to expand Amtrak, we need to say, how are we going to pay for it? And the answer is not raising taxes. So I think we really have to make those justifications before we can say we're going to expand a program that may or may not help the region.
Mr. Darden.
I'm all for expanding Amtrak to Bristol, and I've gone on record with City Council there saying that I think that one of the greatest things I look forward to is to travel from Washington, D.C. back to the Tri-Cities by Amtrak during my tenure as your next U.S. Congressman. It also raises a broader question of infrastructure. We need to make sure that our highways and our bridges are maintained, that they're not crumbling, and that we have new and modern access to our region through new highways, new access to markets that we need to expand our economic opportunities for the 1st Congressional District to other markets in the nation and elsewhere.
Dr. Gapp.
I think the expansion of Amtrak needs to take a return on investment a look at it. If there's a commercial interest in expanding Amtrak, it's something that's worthwhile looking at. But it needs to be done at the local level. That decision needs to be made at the local level. As your congressman, I would be happy to sit at the table and work through those scenarios and work through those discussions. I would hesitate to add any more tax burden to our population, though, at the expense of doing this. It's a program that would need to pay for itself and would need to make economic sense.
Mr. Clark.
I think the role of the congressman that covers 12 counties and 18 cities in our district is to listen to my constituents. If the majority of my constituents really want an Amtrak line going from Washington, D.C. to Bristol, then I, as their congressman, along with all the other elected officials in the 1st District, would work together to find a way to make it happen if it makes financial sense. So I think the other piece of it's great to want to have that. The other piece is it financially feasible, and how much is it going to cost? What's the benefit for our area? And are we willing as citizens to pitch in together to make that happen? So I think the role of the congressman is to bring people together, to address the issue, figure out what the solution is, and then go ahead and pursue if that's what the majority of the people want.
Mr. Hawk.
Thank you, Andre, for the question. Transportation is critically important to the region. If we can add one more tool to the toolbox to make us an attractive location for business to locate, then I want to have that conversation. I think that having that conversation about Amtrak coming into the region makes great sense. I've said this for years. If I could jump on a train and go from Greenville to Nashville in my current work, I would do it tomorrow, even if it took a little bit longer, because the ease of travel. In that vein, if I could take a train from Amtrak, a train from Bristol and go to Washington, I would love to do that as well. I think we must weigh the cost of that. There's a certain role that government should play in that. We don't want to get too involved in the private sector, allow them to fund this the way that they should. If there's something else we need to do with encouragement or some type of a grant program, then we'll certainly look at that. But I'll certainly give it its due attention.
Question number 5 will come from P.J. Johnson, and we'll start with you, Mr. Atkins.
Tennessee's 1st Congressional District has a shortage of bright, hard-working entrepreneurs, often due to the lack of access to capital. What should be done to provide the financial and other resources to help job creators in the district?
I believe that job creation, while it's important, is difficult to do until we have a highly skilled workforce. And, I'm standing here at Northeast State. 10 years ago in the fall, I started my machinist training here, and now I'm working as an engineer. And I believe that in order to have job creators be able to bring good jobs to this area, we have to build up our workforce through supporting places like Northeast State, Regional Center for Advanced Manufacturing in Kingsport, the TCAP programs. Those are what we have to do because, again, the job creators can't do anything unless they have a good workforce. Thank you.
Mr. Darden.
Here's a Darden difference. I've been involved in almost all of the economic development entities in our region for 20 years, since I started my career with the City Commission in Johnson City and served for 10 years. There are a number of organizations that have reached out to angel investors locally and from far away. So I would challenge the premise that there is not money available. I have been in meetings where there have been investors from elsewhere who are eager to fund programs. We just need to encourage our population to take that step, to take a risk. We need to make sure our incubators are generating people with ideas who want to create business because the capital is surprisingly available.
Dr. Gapp?
So I'm a doctor, I'm a healer, but I was born an entrepreneur. I took up my first business loan when I was still in high school. I hired my first employee when I was 21. I've created hundreds of jobs over the years since then. My wife and I have been blessed. We've had a couple successful businesses. So I know a thing or two about creating jobs, and I know a thing or two about accessing capital. And I would agree with Mr. Darden. The capital, I believe, is largely there. It's the know-how, how to access it. And I would absolutely love the opportunity to be able to sit down with the people of East Tennessee as their congressman and help them figure out how to access that capital that's already here. It takes a skill set, and it takes a little bit of willpower, but it's something that we can do. It's something that we can bring here to East Tennessee. Absolutely, 1,000%.
Mr. Clark.
So I'm the only candidate in this race that has released the jobs plan. And for me, it's a 5-point jobs plan. The first point, though, is as your next congressman, is to bring people together in a summit fashion in order to discuss what are the key elements that we need to drive better jobs in the 1st District. And part of that, I'm sure, will be capital. Also, we'll make sure that we understand that we have excellent chambers that offer great small business support. We have incubators, we have accelerators, we have places, product centers, innovative centers where you can make your prototypes. So we have many of the pieces in place for entrepreneurs to do well. The missing piece has been the capital piece, or an abundance of capital to help these entrepreneurs. And so as part of the summit, we need to focus on capital and drive that as much as we can, because I think that's an important piece and that's a viable approach.
Your time has expired.
Thank you.
Mr. Hawk.
Thank you. Education is the key to both entrepreneurship as well as expanding job opportunities in our region. In my role as a state legislator, I've been on the front lines of creating the Tennessee Promise, where we've got last dollar scholarships for community colleges. I've been on the front lines of Tennessee Reconnect, which has brought adult learners back into the education field. We just passed the GIVE Act last year, where our technology centers are now more readily available and quicker to get there, to get folks with the skill in and out and into the workforce. I want to replicate that on a national basis so we can bring those jobs and those opportunities back here to Northeast Tennessee. I think that the money is there. I do think that. I've talked to numerous investors who say, where can I put some dollars? I want to match the investors with the jobs we have in our region of Northeast Tennessee. Thank you.
Mr. Hill.
So the money's there, and everybody that's on this stage is a Republican. We should be talking about making the market robust. When the market thrives, people that want to start a business will reach out where there's capital. I'm happy to build those relationships and also be that Rolodex, a human Rolodex for people that are entrepreneurs. But when the market is doing well, when the economy is doing well, when Trump's economy is in place, which I intend to go to Washington, D.C. if I'm so fortunate to do and support, but when it's in place, entrepreneurship is going to follow. And I love what Launch Tennessee is doing. I love the idea of growing your own business locally, but the market conditions have to be right for individuals and capital funds to put up the money.
Gentlemen, I'd like to remind all the candidates that each of you has all 4 of your rebuttals remaining. And for the next question, we will reverse the order in which the candidates will answer the questions. Question number 6 will come from Julie Bennett. We'll start with you, Mr. Darden.
What is unique to Tennessee's 1st Congressional District, and how will you address it in Congress?
Well, the uniqueness of our area is that it is the best place to live, work, worship, and raise a family that I know of. And I believe that my goal will be to use the skills that I've developed in the negotiating rooms, in the boardrooms, in the courtrooms of East Tennessee to develop relationships in Washington to benefit us here. The job of restoring our economy is job 1. Constituent service is job 2. And so I think that by developing relationships there, we'll be able to make lives better here in the 1st Congressional District, which is my reason for running. We have a unique history. We have the most beautiful surroundings. We have people who are still know what a work ethic is and are respectful and polite, and we are going to benefit as people in the COVID
Your
era.
time has expired.
I'll extend.
Rebuttal.
As people in other parts of the country who have realized that the COVID crisis, because of the COVID crisis, they've realized that there are issues where they live. They're going to be looking for a place like this. And I think that as someone who is knowledgeable about our economic development organizations, I'm the ideal person to lock arms with the local folks and be the ambassador to tell the rest of the state, nation, and world what a special place this is.
Mark, can I rebut that for a second?
Rebuttal.
So with Mr. Darden, he says that he has a lot of experience with economic development. Can you tell me how many jobs you've actually created in Johnson City, and what kind of private capital investment did you bring as well?
Do I get to answer that?
You can use a rebuttal if you want to answer it.
All right. Well, let me just say this. I think it reveals a government creates a framework, but we have attracted a number of employers, and I was hands-on involved in the recruitment of several employers, Nakatetsu, Borla, people who had no connection with this region, but who I was involved as the first point of contact. And they came here, they created jobs, and they're valuable members of our corporate community.
Your time's expired. And Mr. Atkins, you're up next.
Well, the 1st District is an amazing place. You know, I love living here, and I can't imagine there's any other place that I would want to live full time. And we have a rich history of patriotism. You know, the volunteer state that comes from this district. It comes, and I like to remind my friends from Texas that if it weren't for Tennessee, and especially people from this district, they'd be on the other side of the wall. But we've got such a wide range of opportunity here in this district, from tourism to manufacturing, we've got to build that up, but we have the base here. We've got the people, we've got to train them so that we can bring those manufacturing jobs here. There's a lot of jobs in manufacturing in Middle Tennessee that should be moving up to the 1st District. But the fact is that we've got to train those people. But we've got tourism, we've got agriculture. I'm going to extend, by the way. We need to work with our farmers. With COVID, we've definitely seen the problems with the supply chain for our produce and our meat. And when I go to Congress, I intend to push to help pass the Prime Act so that we can have local meat right here in the district. We can help our cattle farmers get their meat to market, and we can help the people of the district to eat food that's made by their neighbors. Thank you.
Mr. Hill?
The 1st Congressional District is America at its finest. We live in the greatest nation on earth, and we live in the greatest Congressional District in the greatest nation on earth, period. What makes it unique is not whether or not a Republican will represent the 1st Congressional District, whether or not it will be conservative. I'm the proven conservative fighter, the conservative warrior that's running for Congress. I've been endorsed by Congressman Jim Jordan, the House Freedom Caucus, House Freedom Fund, as well as Senator Rick Santorum, because they know that I'm going to be pro-life. They know that I'm going to be pro-Second Amendment. They know that I'm going to stand by President Trump and his agenda. They know that I will fight and continue to fight for the values that we hold so dear. It's the values that bind us together. That's what must be fought for. That's what must be protected as I go to Congress. Thank you.
Mr.
Mark and everybody.
Rebuttal?
With Mr. Hill, he says that he's pro-Trump, pro-President Trump, but the reality of it is the special interest company in Washington, D.C. that has provided $500,000 worth of ads to your campaign, sir, is totally anti-Trump. They, in 2016, did not support the president, wanted to run the president out of the country, and now you're saying that you're pro-Trump, but yet you're taking money from a special interest group that does not have any ties to President Trump.
Your time has expired.
It's obvious to see.
You're using a rebuttal to answer?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
It's obvious to see that you're behind because you're on the attack. The bottom line is my campaign has received $0 from the Club for Growth. They supported folks like Marsha Blackburn. I suppose you'd like to go after her as well. They have provided independent expenditure dollars. I have no control over what they say, who they attack, who they support. That is their choice. Many candidates in this race fought for their endorsement. They didn't get it because they know that I'm the proven conservative in the race.
Your time has expired.
We've had over 700 people contribute to our campaign.
Your time has expired.
We're honored to do so.
And no more rebuttals. Mr. Hawk.
Thank you, Julie. The thing I'd like to say that's best about our region is Bristol Motor Speedway. I thought you'd like that answer. We have a unique group of folks here in Northeast Tennessee that get up every day, work hard, do an honest day's work for honest day's pay. And we are Republican district. We're the 3rd or 4th most Republican district in the country, and we are a conservative district. And I find it odd, and it gets mentioned quite often, someone being the most conservative. Well, if you look at the American Conservative Union's rating of all the candidates who have a voting record, my voting record is 89%. The candidate who made the comment is 88% with the American Conservative Union. So if you're counting, I'm 1% more conservative than the individual who made those comments. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about conservative values. That certainly does matter, but we must have common sense values. And that's what we have that's unique to our district here in Northeast Tennessee. We have common sense. We know when right's right. We know when wrong's wrong. Thank you very much.
Your time's expired. Mr. Clark?
The 1st Tennessee District is a special place with special people doing special things every day to improve the quality of life for everyone. It's a fantastic place with great people, hardworking, patriotic, God-loving people, and of course you add that to the beauty of the area. We live in an amazing place. As with Kingsport, though, I don't think that we market our 1st District enough on many different fronts. We also, by the way, have great jobs with 3 major manufacturing industries, healthcare, or 3 industries, manufacturing, healthcare, and automotive services. So we got good jobs as well. We need to market that a lot more. And for me, as your next congressman, I will drive that regionalism approach so that we put Northeast Tennessee in the 1st District on the map across the country so we can attract better businesses here. Thank you.
Dr. Gapp?
East Tennessee is beautiful. The people here are wonderful. I'm a transplant. I wasn't fortunate enough to be born here, but when I found this area, there was no doubt that we were never going to leave. The COVID crisis, I think, has changed the world and accelerated a process that was already going on. But people now realize that they don't have to live in these big cities anymore. They don't have to live in these parts of the country with ideals that aren't ours and values that aren't ours. And I think there's going to be a bunch of opportunity here in this post-COVID world to bring opportunities here to the people of East Tennessee because of these transformations that have happened. And I look forward to being part of that.
Andrea Wilcox has question number 7. We'll start with you, Mr. Adkins.
1 second. Can I get a rule clarification? We're only supposed to be using our phone for timing, not for texting, right?
Correct.
Okay, I have to think on my feet. I'd like Tim to also. Okay, thank you.
The opioid epidemic impacts nearly every Tennessee community. What can be done to reverse this rising and deadly drug abuse issue?
We have to give people hope. Nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks, I'm going to become an opioid addict. Nobody thinks I'm going to throw my life down the drain because of that. I'm a foster parent, and I've had children come through my home that go into the foster system because of opioids. So we've got to give people hope, and we've got to give them a chance. A lot of people get into it because they can't get a job. And that's why I want to build up training that's at the skilled level. Not, everybody doesn't have to go to college. And then I also want to institute criminal justice reform, because I think a lot of people are hopeless when they come out of the criminal justice system. I believe in law and order, but I believe that once you have paid your debt to society, you should be able to re-enter it and not live as a second-class citizen. Thank you.
Mr. Hill?
Everybody knows someone that's been affected, whether it's them personally or a family member. There's no question about that. At the state level, we've addressed it and tried to address it, and again, we do our best. The bottom line, what we're talking about is we're talking about addiction. It could be opioid, it could be alcoholism, it could be a host of various mental health concerns. Is it treatment? Yes. Is it options for treatment? Yes. Is it drug courts? Yes. It should be all of the above, and it should have the full support of the next congressman. It will have my full support because it's something that has hit the region so very, very hard.
Mr. Hawk? Thank you, Andrea. The issue really gets to the heart of the big concerns that we have here in Northeast Tennessee. For all the good that we have, the opioid epidemic has really unveiled a dark side of our region. Interstate 81 has become a corridor for opioids. Good or bad, that's what it is. I've led the way in Tennessee to create greater mental health and substance abuse treatment in our communities. We need at a federal level to take that even further and do it within a responsible budget. We don't need to throw money at it. What we're spending now in incarcerations in our prison system, we could take a fraction of that and treat someone in a long-term care facility and save in the long run and get them back on path to where they become a viable member of society. Mental health includes health treatment. It's a social issue. It's an economic development issue, and we must do a better job creating greater long-term care and facilities across our country. Mr. Clark?
Unfortunately, the opioid issue is the epicenter for that is in our district, and we've been trying to battle it over the years with prevention, treatment, and law enforcement. All of those things go hand in hand, and I think we've been doing a good job of it. But at the same time, I believe that as your next congressman, again, is bringing people together for a common cause and for the good of all. And I think we have a great opportunity to come together as a region. It's another regional issue that we can work together on, share best practices, and figure out the best way to attack this problem. Right now, I still believe we're doing it a little bit too piecemeal between the different counties and also the different cities. And I think the congressman, that position has a great opportunity to bring people together and to solve the problems that we have in our region and the opioid crisis, as well as many more illegal drugs like fentanyl, meth, and heroin, who are also winding up in the middle of our neighborhoods as well. They're coming through the southern border. So shutting down the border and stopping this inflow of drugs will also help in that area. Thank you.
Dr. Gabb?
So the opioid epidemic is multifactorial. It's a combination of mental health issues, economic issues, border security, and treatment programs and what's available. So first and foremost, we need to secure our southern border. We have a supply problem with opioids and all other illicit drugs coming in through our southern border. So we need to stand with President Trump, finish building the wall, secure our border. Mental health, I think, is something that I feel like we did a better job with when I was a kid growing up than we do today, and it's something that we do need to invest into. There are people in this world that I see as a physician who don't have the same ability to cope with life that the rest of us do, and it's an area that we need to invest back into and do a better job of, and I will as your congressman.
Mr. Darden?
Yes, knowing that Congressman Rowe would not serve forever, I've been preparing for this job. And one of the things I did was take a position on the ETSU Addiction Science Center Task Force. I've been surrounded by public health experts, and I've learned a great deal about their cutting-edge treatment of folks and treating the root cause and the whole person. And there's much promise in their work. But there still are unscrupulous providers who prey on others, and they need to be prosecuted and punished. Drug courts are really very effective so far in taking folks who may have drug violations and helping them to avoid doing time or facing prosecution through counseling and other ways of overcoming their problems.
PJ has question number 8. We'll start with you, Mr. Hill.
Farmers. Farmers are very important to East Tennessee. Why should farmers vote for you?
Well, one, I actually like to eat. I know that's hard to believe. Our farmers are fundamental to the culture of Northeast Tennessee. They have been, obviously, since history began in this part of the state. It was mentioned before, we're very self-reliant people. That's a good thing. Part of the reason that I was invited to the White House by President Trump is because I supported the USMCA trade deal at the state level. In the room, you had commercial farming, you had Big Steel, and you also had quite a few other folks on the White House lawn that day. In fact, I believe I was one of the only state legislators there. Because we know that those international trade deals can be very, very good for farming, and that can be very, very good for the 1st Congressional District.
Mr. Hawk?
Thank you, PJ. Our agricultural community has been overregulated for decades now. The best way we can say thank you to our farming community is to allow them to do their job that they've done for centuries by being stewards of the land that they've been their whole lives. That's what I want to do as our congressman. We must have a valid and a reliable guest worker program in place as well. Unfortunately, you've got some rogue elements out there that are bringing folks into the country illegally. We need to have folks in the country legally doing these jobs to help our farmers as well, to keep the cost of products down. I've been on the front lines working on water issues, working on soil issues, working on air issues that our farmers have asked me to work on for the last 18 years. They know my track record in Nashville working with them. The Farm Bureau, I've got an excellent grade with them. I want to take that same skill set, those same work ethics that I brought to the state legislature for farmers
Your
into
time
Washington.
has expired. Mr. Clark?
So my Tennessee family are longtime farmers. The farm has been in our family business over the last 200 years. My wife was born and raised on a dairy farm. She's 9th generation. My two daughters are 10th generation. I've seen farming firsthand and how amazing our farmers are. Most farmers get up every day, they milk or they handle their farm chores, and then they go to work to another business where they can get health care and other types of benefits and insurance and so forth to help them out. And then they come back after work and they work another 6 hours farming. So amazing hard workers. What they need are lower taxes, better trade deals to open up markets for their products, and also less government regulations. And as their next congressman, as farmers in our district, I will submit to you that I will work hard every day to try to help you achieve your goals and help improve your quality of life as a farmer. Thank you.
Dr. Gapp?
So I grew up in a farming state. I grew up in a farming community and economy, and so I understand farming. The one thing that I worry about the most right now with farmers is the next generation of farmers. I think the other day we were told that the average age of the farmer here in East Tennessee is 60 years old. That obviously is not sustainable for the future. We need to figure out a way to eliminate or severely tamp down the inheritance tax and the ability for our farmers to pass their family farms down to the next generation. We also need a clean farm bill. The Washington, D.C. has done a good job of mucking up the farm bill and trying to add a whole bunch of waste to it. The farmers deserve better. They deserve a clean farm bill, and I'll be up there and I'll help them to get that done.
Mr. Darden.
Agriculture is Tennessee's #1 industry, and I would be very honored to have a spot on the Agriculture Committee as a rookie congressman. I think that I would be able to make a difference and to help farmers survive, not just survive, but to thrive. Our farm culture needs to be preserved. Our rural communities need to be preserved. My labor law background will be quite an asset as a member of the Agricultural Committee, and I have some ideas about the Farm Worker Guest Program that could be enhanced by taking that from the auspices of the Department of Labor and moving it to the Department of Agriculture, where folks better understand farmers and their needs.
Mr. Atkins.
Well, I'm not going to pretend I'm a farmer. I pass a lot of farms and I pass a lot of cattle fields when I go home. But I know I make things. I don't grow things. But I'm not Michael Bloomberg. I know there's a lot more than putting the corn in the ground and waiting for the plant to come up. There was one candidate who's already dropped out, Chad Fleener. He is a cattle farmer, and he endorsed me. I do know that we have to cut regulations, and we have to make things easier for all Americans, no matter whether they're farmers or not, with health care. John mentioned farmers, have to go work another job just so they can get health care. No American should have to go to a specific job to get health care. They should be able to get it themselves. Now, I'm not talking about socialized medicine, and I'm not talking about a monopoly like Ballot Health, but I'm talking about a personal plan that you can take with you that's portable and that's available on the open market. I also am talking about for...
Your time has expired.
I'd like to extend.
Extend.
For our cattle farmers, because I personally love good steak, and I would love to be able to have a steak that was grown in the farm next to where I live. And we have to do things to pass the Prime Act, which what that does is that allows local farmers to have their cattle slaughtered locally without having to go through federal regulation. They'll be regulated by the state. Thank you.
Question number 9, will come from Julie Bennett. We'll start with you, Mr. Hawk.
The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted U.S. reliance on critical medical supplies and pharmaceuticals manufactured abroad. How does the U.S. reduce reliance on foreign countries for those and other essential products?
Thank you, Julie. And that's been part of my platform since day one, is bringing those manufacturing jobs back to our country. We have relied too long on inferior products from other countries just because they were cheap. We've become a commodity society that doesn't value quality the way that we used to. I think that we need to bring especially those pharmaceutical jobs back to our country, so we know what is going into our bodies. We've had Chinese pharmaceuticals that have been brought in fraudulently to our region of Tennessee for decades now, and that has to stop. Just the sheer mask issue that we're talking about, the fact that we're getting all of our masks from a foreign country, put us at a disadvantage. We need to bring that back. We don't need to isolate ourselves as a country, but we need to bring those jobs back so we've got faith in what we're doing, the level of quality, and also the accessibility to those products long term.
Mr. Clark.
So my background is in medical products manufacturing, 36 years. I've worked for several manufacturing companies. And I would say in the private sector, it's we have to make it financially attractive for these businesses that are profit-oriented to come back to this country. But in this particular case, with our medical supply chains, we really need to make these medical products that we deem to be critical to our success. We have to change their nomenclature to say that they are national security types of products, and we need to bring them back to this country regardless at what cost, because we can't afford to be in a position that we've been in, trying to rely on a communist country that you cannot, and government that you cannot trust to supply us with those key components.
Dr. Gapp?
So this is a great question. It goes with the pharmaceuticals for sure, but at all levels of manufacturing, at all levels of our supply chain, this COVID crisis has demonstrated the weaknesses of our supply chains and how frail they are to international and national threats. And there are particular bad actors out there, China being one of them, that we need to make sure we are holding them accountable for what they're doing to our country and to our manufacturers and our businesses and our citizens. Going with what everybody else has been saying, these pharmaceuticals, they're critical. We need to have that. We need to have that done here, just like we need to have our military products done here. But in general, the free trade with China, we need to hold them accountable and bring those jobs back here.
Mr. Darden.
Thank you. We were way too eager to transfer our industrial might to foreign lands that were able to produce things very, very cheaply because of sweatshop labor, because of lax environmental standards, and because of government support of those type of programs. And I think the chickens are coming home to roost. We see that in many of our industries. And certainly medical supplies and pharmaceuticals are one that has been critically apparent during the COVID crisis. So I support the moves that are underway. The federal government has the power of the purse. And if our agencies will purchase items that are made domestically, then those items will be shifted here for production.
Mr. Atkins.
I believe free trade is important, but free trade has to be that. It has to be free. And we're dealing with a country that manipulates its currency and uses slave labor. We have to cut back on our dealing with China. We have to recognize that they are a communist country and they support an ideology that has killed 100 million people in the last decade. We can't do that. We didn't win the Cold War by working with the Soviet Union. We have to stop dealing with China. I think we need to end the one China policy. We need to support people who like freedom. We need to support the people of Hong Kong. And when we do that, we've got to bring back our manufacturing. Or if we can't bring it back, at least work with countries that are friendly to us and our democracies. And I'm going to extend.
Extend.
And we have to have a skilled workforce. When we sent those jobs away to China, we told our children that the only way that they were going to have a good life was to go get a 4-year degree. And now we've got people with bachelor's degrees in liberal studies who are out protesting and talking about how they hate this nation. We have to build up our skilled labor force so we can bring those jobs back.
Mr. Hill.
It's not a question. We need to reduce our dependence on China. We need to look and see the critical areas, whether it's food manufacturing, whether it's medicines, whether it's PPE, all the above. China is not our friend. We need to stop acting like it. One of the things that I'm deeply concerned about is Diana Harshbarger is compromised on the issue of China. She chose very much so not to be here tonight because she doesn't care what anyone has to think about her. She's running and hiding from the people of 1st Congressional District. She's continuously been dodging any open interviews because this issue is critical. This issue is important. And she, of all people in this entire race, should be answering for what she has done, for what she's been a part of, but she refuses to do so.
And gentlemen, our final question of the evening, we have just enough time for this, so all rebuttals at this point have expired. All opportunities to extend your remarks have expired. The final question, number 10 tonight, will come from Andrea Wilcox, and we'll start with you, Mr. Clark.
What should be the future of the Tennessee Valley Authority?
I think we need to keep the Tennessee Valley Authority intact. I think it provides a great service to our region and to our state. And I also believe in economic development and getting our economy back on track. They do a very strong job in helping drive the focus on more jobs and economic development throughout our valley as well. So they are a critical component, I think, of the job creation process. And so as your next congressman, I will be working very hard with the TVA to help us restart our economy and get people engaged in the process so that everyone can have a chance at the American dream in our area. Thank you.
Dr. Gapp.
Yeah, so the Tennessee Valley Authority has a long and storied history here in Tennessee, and it's one that we should continue to have a long and storied history with. I would look to areas in which we can enter the private sector as much as possible. But when you're talking about infrastructure like what you're getting there, there's a role in which the Tennessee Valley Authority I think will continue to play, and it's going to be here for a while.
Mr. Darden.
This question really points out another Darden difference. For the past several years, I've been counsel to the provider in Northeast Tennessee known as Bright Ridge, and I've gotten an education from the inside. TVA was created to help eradicate flooding in the Tennessee Valley. It did that. It provides man-made lakes for recreation that are part of our economy and part of our quality of life, part of our tourist draw. The power that is provided is below the cost of most major providers, so that's a real benefit when we're trying to attract industry. TVA has a massive economic development operation which benefits us considerably, and so I think that TVA should continue as is. Any calls that might be made to sell TVA or break it up would be resisted staunchly by me.
Mr. Atkins?
Well, first of all, TVA definitely needs to be around long enough to get Boone Lake filled back up. But in seriousness, I do believe we have to keep the TVA around. And, when people think of the TVA, they think of dams and they think of lakes and they think of hydroelectric power. But if we want clean energy, we also have to expand our nuclear energy, and the TVA does that too. And we need to open up our nuclear regulation so that TVA can build reactors that aren't designed on 70s technology. There's newer, cleaner energy that can, again, make inexpensive energy for the region to help our industry and still be safe. It's safe, and we've got nuclear fuel services here, which services the Navy. We have to have expanded nuclear energy, and the TVA can bring that to us.
Mr. Hill.
I think that the TVA needs to be intact, and we need to continue our partnership, everything from the federal to the state level, to the local level, because it's so integral to really our success, from economic development to power, just fishing, you name it. It's very, very important. I'm a little disappointed we didn't get to talk tonight about Ballard, and not just Rusty Crowe's involvement being on the payroll of Ballard and also passing the legislation that created the inception of it, but also how it's hurting our people. Not an indictment of the providers, the nurses, or the support staff, but what are we doing to our region? What's the best course? There was no question asked about that tonight, and I'm so very, very disappointed, because I'm convinced that I am the candidate that will give us a fair shake and give us the best shot to get Ballard right. Thank you.
Mr. Hawk?
Thank you. The question about TVA, I think TVA should continue. I think they have a good structure in place. I want to see more board members from Tennessee, and specifically from Northeast Tennessee, and we're going to achieve that with one of our university presidents being on the board very soon. I think that we need to have a greater voice in what goes on, and TVA needs to listen to us as a region as to what our thoughts are, our needs are. TVA provides reliable energy that our businesses and our industries need, so they are a valuable economic development tool that every city and every county and every economic developer in the region uses as a partner to bring new industry in. We need to continue to work with TVA to make sure that happens. We need to empower them to do even more as an entity in this region. Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, I owe all six of you an apology. Apparently my timekeeping skills are atrocious. We actually have time for another question. Paul Johnson has question number 11, and we'll start with you, Dr. Gapp.
In the last decade or so, the federal government has offered bailouts and stimulus programs for financial, health, and other disasters. Now, some view this as the new normal. What are your thoughts?
So our national debt at last count, I believe, is around $26 trillion. That's not sustainable. That's a tax on our future generations. It's a tax on my children. It's a tax on my, hopefully someday, grandchildren, and on all of yours. Bailouts and extra spending, these are all things that we need to curtail. We need to find a way to have the federal government live within the same budget that you and I are expected to live in our daily households. And that goes for all levels of government, not just the federal government. And there are times when the federal government should step in and help in an emergency setting, but those should be offset. They should be accounted for. And we need to do a better job of balancing our budget and paying down this debt so that my children and your grandchildren do not have to.
Mr. Darden?
Here's another Darden difference. I've kind of been here and done that. When I became a city councilman in Johnson City, we had 56 audit findings, 56. Our finances were a mess, and it took discipline and somebody with an accounting degree, like me, to show others what we needed to do to really get our arms around it. Now, that's on a small scale. But ladies and gentlemen, what we do on a small scale budgetarily is the same thing we need to do on a big scale. We need to evaluate in the federal budget every program, every expenditure, and determine if it can survive a cost-benefit analysis. And if it cannot, we need to stop doing it. We're going to have to address entitlements. We're going to have to address runaway spending. This is not sustainable. And so with some discipline and a commitment to actually shrinking government and not just talking about it, then we might be able to whittle away at our national debt through annual.
Your time has expired.
Budget balancing. Thank you.
Mr. Atkins?
Like I said, we're living on our credit card right now. We don't have emergency money. We've got to cut back our spending, and I do not believe that there is any part of our federal budget that can't take a cut. I believe in strong national defense, but there's still bloat in our national defense budget. And when I say a cut, I don't mean we don't increase our budget and we call it a cut. We actually cut down our budget. If we pass a budget at all, we keep living on continuing resolutions. We've got to stop that. We've got to call for a real budget, and we have to balance it. I have to say, we have to look at Tennessee. The Tennessee on a state level handles its money pretty well. So well, in fact, that we didn't need a gas tax increase, but it got passed by the legislature anyway. Now, Once we do that, then we have money for emergencies. But until then, we can't just spend, say we've got emergency money when we don't have it to spend. And no company should be, quote, too big to fail.
And Mr. Hill.
To be clear, that gas tax got passed with my no vote. I did not vote for that and proud to fight against it. Look, the federal government doesn't have a revenue problem. It has a spending problem. It's addicted. Our federal government is addicted to spending. There are emergency situations where it makes sense for the federal government to step in, but that is on a very, very limited basis because you cannot print your way to success. At some point, the piper will have to be paid. And will it be our children or our grandchildren or our great-grandchildren? And again, we've discussed, and China doesn't just hold our manufacturing, it holds our debt. And that is disconcerting, and we must protect our interests.
And Mr. Hawk.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear the conversation about the gas tax come up because I actually presented the alternative plan that the representative who just spoke voted for. It became known as the Hawk Plan, which was an alternative to a motor fuel tax increase. To this day, I still think it would be a better plan to still give us the infrastructure funding that we need. That being said, I have served on our budget committee in the state of Tennessee. As you've heard, all these good things about where we are in Tennessee right now, largely because of the work of our House Finance Committee that I've been on for the better part of a decade. We balance our budget in Tennessee, and we still put money away for a rainy day. We've cut taxes by the tune of $1 billion here over the course of that decade. I want to take those same philosophies with me to Washington, work on the Appropriations Committee, open every single entitlement program that we've got on the books, say this has value, this doesn't have value, we cut there, and we must balance our budget and reduce the deficit spending. My young daughters did not deserve to have this deficit for the rest of their lives. They didn't ask for that.
And Mr. Clark.
So speaking of taxes, I know that our state reps here did vote for a 30% tax increase on everyone's phone bill. So those are the types of things we need to try to slow down and use as an example for Washington. But the only way for us to impact that $27 trillion debt is, first of all, we got to get our economy back on track. We got to get it to where it was 3 months ago, which was a roaring economy, the best that I've seen in my lifetime. That's critical to have any hopes whatsoever of going after that national debt reduction. The second is we got to stop this movement to socialism. We think $27 trillion is high. It'll be a drop in a bucket if we let these leftist socialist Democrats get the best of us and continue to tack on to the national debt. And the third thing we must do, we got to be able to balance our budget one time. Why is it that we have to do it in our families? We have to do it in our counties, in our cities, in the state of Tennessee, but the federal government can't do it. So sending me up to Washington, D.C. to show them how to balance the budget in the private sector and in the public sector is what I'm all about, and that's what I want to do.
And your time has expired. Now, gentlemen, this time I'm correct. There's time for one question left. You're limited to 40-second responses. This question will come from Julie Bennett, and we will reverse the order of responses. Mr. Darden, you're first.
All right. At more than $1 trillion, student loan debt is now bigger than vehicle loan and credit card debt. It is second only to mortgage debt. In Tennessee, about 60% of graduates have student loan debt averaging over $27,000. What role does Congress have, if any, in addressing this problem?
Well, I think that one thing we need to look at is the interest rate that folks are paying. We are having historically low interest rates right now. Yet there are people who are paying off student debts at 7%, 8%, 9%. We need to take a look at whether we could provide a break to those folks by bringing those rates down to something that is more akin to what folks are paying for debt that they incur now. Not to forgive the loan, but to perhaps allow a lower interest rate to be observed.
Dr. Gapp?
So student loan debt, sorry, somebody's making some noise back there. Student loan debt is, when you go to the bank and you take out money, you owe that bank money. Student loan debt itself, this number that you threw out there, I do not see as a federal government problem. What I do see as a federal government problem is the way that the federal government has allowed student loans so easily accessed that it becomes this fly trap for young people to acquire the debt in the first place. And we need to address that when I'm up there.
And your time has expired. Mr. Clark?
I think the answer to this question is just a better job. We got to get our economy going again. Everybody needs to have access to a great job as long as they have a marketable skill and an education. Then they got to go out and work like all of us have done in our lives. Hard work, that's the American way. And we got to get back to that as best we can. This issue about trying to deal with student debt in a different way. Look, the American way is work hard, go get an education, go land a great job, pay off your debt, and provide for your family. That's the American dream. We got to get back to helping our young folks understand what the American dream is all about. As your next congressman, I'll try to lead that effort in the 1st District.
Mr. Hawk?
Thank you. The federal government has no role in reducing student loan debt. What we need to do as communities is teach financial literacy. We need to teach our students that there's no reason to go into debt in the first place. What we've done in Tennessee, we've created the programs I spoke about earlier, where you've got the Tennessee Promise, last dollar scholarships. You've got the Tennessee Reconnect, last dollar scholarships. You've got the Give Act, last dollar scholarships. We've got those programs in place right now that no student in Tennessee should have to go deeply into debt. We need to teach financial literacy and tell folks that it's not a good thing to go into debt like our country has. Thank you.
Mr. Hill?
And we can talk about the reduction of the interest rate. I think that's fine to do so, but the real question is why is the federal government in doing student loans in the first place? That's not the role of the federal government. If anything, what it has done is it's inflated the overall cost of an education, and that is a disservice to our students, period.
Mr. Atkins?
I agree. We've got to limit the federal government's involvement in student loans. The reason we're in this mess is because the federal government has supported just giving out extreme amounts of money to students, no matter what their degree path, no matter how well they're doing in school. I think like any other loan, student loans should be based on a potential return on investment. If I want to get a house mortgage, I've got to have an appraisal done. And so I think we need to look at the degree paths that people are choosing and determine if they've got a return on investment. I'm not against refis, but I think if somebody wants to refinance their student loan, they need to show that they can repay it.
And that concludes the Q&A for this evening. Pardon me. Earlier, the campaigns drew cards to determine the order of their closing remarks. Candidates, you each have 2 minutes. Mr. Darden, you're first.
Thank you very much. Tonight has been mostly cordial, but outside here the campaign has turned rather negative. I, however, have stayed positive. The process of earning your vote and pointing out the Darden differences has reinforced what I already knew. We live in a special place with special people. I've spent my career representing clients zealously and gave my best effort as Johnson City's mayor, vice mayor, and city commissioner, and that's what I'm offering now. I feel like I've been preparing my whole life to take this step, starting with washing dishes at my dad's restaurant at age 8, which taught me how to work and taught me how to serve others at a young age. In one way or another, I've been serving others ever since. So I'm asking you to vote for me, but first, I need for you to trust me, to know that I will listen, and to realize how much I care about our nation and our area. I'm running for a simple reason: to make lives better for the people of our district. The foundation of the Darden differences is the 3 Ps. I'm a professional. I'm a labor lawyer and mediator and small business owner. I'll use the skills I've developed in the boardrooms, courtrooms, and at the negotiating tables of East Tennessee to build relationships in Washington to help us here at home. I'm passionate about our area, about its people, and not only its history, but its future. And finally, I'm prepared. I know through my close association with Congressman Rowe how hard he and his staff work. We will do the same. My election means continuity, which is important to get us back to the robust Trump economy. President Reagan nailed it when he said that the best social program is a good job. And I aim to see more people in our district with good jobs that will lift them up.
And your time's expired. Mr. Clark.
Yeah, Mark, and thank you to Channel 5 for this great opportunity today. I do want to say that the only reason why I'm running for this office is because I want to make a positive difference in the lives of all 1st Tennessee District residents. And I do want to say that for all of us that are here tonight showing up, being accessible, answering the tough questions, that's what a public servant is supposed to do. And I'd like to have the viewers at home, the voters, make sure that you take a look at who made it here tonight and who didn't. Mr. Rusty Crowe and Miss Diana Harshberger did not show up tonight. They weren't here. They weren't here to serve for you in the public eye. And that's a shame. I think that's an indication of what kind of congressman they're going to be in the future. So I would hope that you would take that into account before you vote. But look, I'm running for this seat for a few reasons that I think really differentiates me. Number one, I will fight for your freedoms. And I believe that is, regardless of all the things we talked about today, without our freedoms, we don't have America. And our freedoms are under attack. They're under attack by the leftist socialist Democrats. And I want to go to Washington, D.C. and stand shoulder to shoulder with President Trump and go toe-to-toe with Nancy Pelosi, AOC, the Squad. These are socialists who are trying to change the fabric of our country. Bigger government, less individual freedoms. Unless we stop this movement, we really don't have our country, and we're not going to be able to work on all these great things that we discussed tonight. The second is I'm a job creator. There's nothing more important, I think, for the next congressman for the next 2 years to work hard and jump-starting, helping do what we can to use the congressional office to partner with all the great folks in our district to get our economy back on track. We got to get good paying jobs. I know how to do that. I worked with a great team in Sullivan County. We brought thousands of jobs into our county and millions of dollars worth of private capital investment. I want to do it. I want to do the same for you across the district. And lastly, my background, 36 years in business, 7 years in public service. I know how to bring people together to make that happen. Please vote John Clark for Congress. Thank you.
Mr. Hill.
The question is not whether the 1st Congressional District is going to be Republican. The question is whether or not it's going to be conservative. I'm the proven conservative fighter in the race. I've been endorsed by Congressman Jim Jordan, the Freedom Caucus, the House Freedom Fund, as well as Senator Rick Santorum and others, because they know that I am a conservative fighter. I'm pro-life. Life begins at conception, ends at natural death. I'm pro-Second Amendment, and I'm going to stand with President Trump every step of the way as we try to get this country back on track. My cell phone number is 423-646-1589. There needs to be zero barrier between you and your member of Congress, because in Washington, D.C., they've completely forgotten who they work for. This seat doesn't belong to the multimillionaires trying to buy the seat. It doesn't belong to a backroom deal. It doesn't belong to a poll. It belongs to you. I'm Timothy Hill, and I'm asking for your vote because I want to serve you. I'm asking for your prayers because the campaign trail is rough. And we're very grateful to be where we are in the race, and we're looking forward to serving you. My campaign has been positive, completely positive every step of the way, talking about what our conservative vision will be as we go to Washington, D.C. So I humbly ask for your vote, look forward to your support. Please feel free to call me if you have questions, and let's go win this.
Mr. Atkins.
Well, I'm standing on stage with a lot of years of political service and a lot of money. In fact, I'm only here because 2 people didn't want to talk to the district. That's okay, because I want to serve this district. And we've heard a candidate say you're behind because you're attacking, and then follow up by attacking. Didn't really make much sense to me, but that's okay. I don't want to tell you why you shouldn't vote for somebody. I want to tell you why you should vote for me. We've got people here who tell you they've been preparing because they knew that Phil Rowe was going to retire. I've prepared for this by living out the values of this district. Some politicians are going to tell you that you need somebody with experience in the legislature. We don't need that experience. We don't need swamp experience. We need experience living out our values. I'm a foster dad because I believe that being pro-life means being more than pro-birth. And I believe that we have to protect our children who are in unwanted or unfit homes. I'm a veteran because I believe this country is worth fighting for. And when some people tell you they're a freedom fighter, I want to remind them that only one person on this stage raised their hand to volunteer to fight for this country. And I'm an engineer. I've got a decade of experience in manufacturing that shows that I know the skills that we need to build up our jobs here. In 2016, we were told by the establishment that if we got the House, we got the Senate, President Trump wins the White House, we're going to defund Planned Parenthood and we're going to repeal and replace Obamacare. Well, 4 years later, Obamacare is still a law, and Planned Parenthood still gets your taxpayer dollars. So I'm asking you to vote for service over self. Tell the establishment no more. Flush out the swamp with fresh water. My name is Jay Atkins, and I'd like your vote.
Mr. Hawk.
Thank you very much. It's been a great evening to our viewers out there and our listeners. Thank you so much. I am David Hawk, and I'm ready to serve you from day one in Washington. You have allowed me to gather the valuable experience of having 20 years of a small business, 18 years of serving you in the state legislature. I'm ready to go day one to be a strong voice for you in Washington. We've heard about Republican district. We've heard about conservative district. I'll remind you once again that I have the most conservative voting record of anyone on this stage, of anyone in this race, 89% according to the American Conservative Union, but I'm not touting that. We're all going to be conservative. We're all going to be pro-Trump. We're all going to be pro-life, pro-gun, pro-military, pro-police. But there are hundreds, if not thousands, of issues that are important to you that I'm going to go and speak for you in Washington about. That is critically important, that you have someone who is well prepared to go beyond the rhetoric of all these low-hanging fruit issues to deeply understand the issues that are before us in Washington. I want to be that person. Endorsements are great. I never asked for any endorsements. The only endorsement I want is your vote. If I ask for those endorsements, I'm going to owe those people something someday down the road. I don't want to owe anybody anything in this race other than you, the voters. You get my hard work. You get my dedication. I have 2 young daughters, 19 years old and 9. My 19-year-old is a brilliant young lady studying chemical engineering right now. My 9-year-old is just as brilliant. She can't understand why she can't study chemical engineering with her big sister right now. I have to tell her, baby, you got to get through 4th grade first. I want the best life possible for them. That's why I'm running. It's for you, for my daughters, for your family, that they can have the best future available. Once again, I'm David Hawk. Visit davidhawk4tennessee.com. Check me out. I ask for your vote.
And Dr. Gapp.
So thank you so much for having me here tonight. Thank you to the moderators and for all those watching at home. Thank you for everybody who's voted early, especially those who voted for me. And thank you for all my fans watching here tonight. Georgia, Judy, Shelley, you're on my mind. As a pathologist, I'm a doctor who's trained to spot cancer, and I can tell you that political correctness has become a cancer on our system. The radical liberal activists, including Antifa and the BLM Marxist movement, want to destroy our country. They want to erase our history, and they want to rewrite it, and they want to ruin the American dream for our future generations. I grew up humble. I grew up in a trailer park, but I was rich in the optimism of the American dream. And I've been blessed that I've been able to realize that dream in my life. But I'm incredibly worried that the dream won't be there for our future generations. And I'm running because I volunteered to be your champion to protect our Second Amendment rights, our religious freedoms, fighting for our unborn, and to stand up for our shared values. President Trump, I think, has been so effective, at least in my mind, because he truly can't be bought by the special interests. Like Trump, I'm the only major candidate in this race who hasn't taken a single penny from any of the insiders, special interest groups, PACs, or anybody else. So you'll know that when I get up there, I'll be able to vote my conscience, and I'm only beholden to you and God. I think you have a clear choice in this election. You can vote for the outsider, who won't back down from helping President Trump fight the cancer of political correctness and stop it from taking away our history and our God-given rights, or you can do the same old as we've always done. I humbly ask for your vote this August 6th and throughout the rest of this early voting period. Please visit joshgapp.com to see more information and see some great content. Thank you.
This concludes tonight's debate. We'd like to thank the candidates for their participation. Gentlemen, good luck in your campaigns. Thank you to the Bristol County Let's try that again. Let's thank you to Bristol, Greene County, Johnson City, and Kingsport Chambers of Commerce for sponsoring, and the Northeast State Community College for hosting tonight's debate. Big thanks to Andrea Wilcox, PJ Johnson, and Julie Bennett for serving as panelists. Thank you at home for joining us. Please join us at facebook.com/news5WCYB and tell us who you think won tonight's debate. In closing, we'd like to salute the military, law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs, and other emergency personnel for their service to our communities and our nation. I'm Mark Hyman. Thank you. And now, don't go away just yet, because we have instant reaction and analysis on the Fox 39 News at 10. So I'm going to toss it to my colleague, Rebecca Pepin, in the studio. Rebecca?
Thanks, Mark. And thank you for watching Your Voice, Your Future, Tennessee's 1st Congressional District GOP debate here on News 5 WCYB and WCYB.com. Join me right now on our sister station, WEMT Fox 39 News at 10, where we'll have analysis and insight from tonight's debate.